Hi, my name's Norbert Yates. I created this Merle Logan digital painting. I'm part of Thursday Productions. We create Children of the Dead graphic novel. I heard one description of it as Lord of the Flies meet The Walking Dead. Another thing we've done some is identity crisis pictures. We thought it might be interesting if you saw how this picture was constructed. I'm always a big fan of seeing process type stuff. And so for this one, we went to a convention in Indianapolis, and one of the people that visited our booth had an idea for identity crisis. His name is Robert Goodyear, and he's administrator of the Walking Dead fan group. And he thought it might be cool to mash Logan, I think it's from Weapon X, where he loses his arm, and Merle from Walking Dead. And so we agreed that we thought that was a cool idea because it's sort of in our genre of what we're trying to do with the Children of the Dead. So the first idea, when we got this idea, is where do you go from that? So my first thing is I did a little research because I'm not real familiar with The Walking Dead, purposely to stay away from mimicking it too much, even subconsciously. Did a little research into the images and stuff, and the Logan part had to do a little bit of research on that. Basically, Logan has such a strong visual image look. It was tough to sort of combine that with Merle, and so my idea was basically to put Logan in Merle's clothes, that sort of feel, maybe cropping his hair closer, but that would be about it. Let's go to the initial concept. My initial concept was sort of a little bit of a Frank Vazetta sort of shadow him after wiping out a bunch of zombies. While it was kind of cool, it wasn't very action oriented. So we went to the next sketch, which I liked a lot better, and it had kind of a triangle type composition. But the guy I work with, he said, well, what if the arm was going up? So you see this in this sketch, that it's going up. I just didn't feel like the composition worked as well. And I felt more comfortable with this sketch. Thought that the composition was pretty strong. So I not only did that, I went and used a program called Phi Matrix that will generate a golden ratio layout for you. And while it was pretty much on, I used it as I took the sketch and I formatted it in sort of the size ratio that we was going to use for it, which would be like 11 by 17. So as you can see in this one, the character's head lines up. I try to make sure that it's not, you don't become a slave to it, but you try to make your items fit roughly within the golden ratio, and it seems to feel balanced. And if you do it right, I think it moves people where you want them to see what you want them to see and focus on. So next you go from the sort of the more tightened sketch to a finished sketch. Most of the time I go from that into an actual inking, because in a comics situation, that's generally been my process, and I really like inking. But in this one, I thought I would go to a full digital paint, and so all I did is I stopped at the pencil stage. I was under the mistaken thought that this would actually speed up the process, but didn't turn out that way. So the program I used is Art Rage. I like the natural feel of the tools. Sometimes Photoshop to me feels a little, it's so clean and almost too perfect. I bring up my Art Rage. My first thought is just to block in colors. I started working on the grass and water. I tried to take a couple of the more boring items and work on that. And then I stuck in a tower. I thought that might be interesting, put a tower in there and the fencing. And I actually used Blender to just put it in. Blender is a 3D program. I use it on varying levels. Sometimes I just use it to put rough shapes in there to get my perspective right. And sometimes I'll even render solid colors on it and and that sort of stuff. But for the most part, I just use it as a tool to help me line things up and get things moving in a quick way, since I'm pretty quick with it. Once we got the colors blocked out, I turn off the pencils and start actually painting. And I tried to start with the foreground zombies because I wanted to focus on the less glamorous elements initially, and then which sometimes works out and sometimes it doesn't, but started out with the zombies. And what my thought was on it was that I would use less contrast and it'd be a little darker in the foreground zombies to push your eyes in towards the center with our main character. You can see I blocked out more saturated colors for the focal point, and then used more subdued and more grays and less contrast on the foreground in order to push your eyes hopefully into the middle. So the next picture, I start turning on the pencils back again so that I can start getting the outlines of the center characters, just putting in shadows. And as you can see, the shadow and what I wanted to do was the most contrast being in our center character, Merle Logan picture, and work out from that, and everything, sort of focus you to the highest level of contrast and being more saturated in the middle. In the next picture, you just the side zombies, the zombies surrounding him. I start adding more detail into that, just sort of roughing out some darks. And I wanted to paint him with his skin to really contrast with the zombie. I wanted it to be more saturated. I wanted to have more gleam to it, more alive, and more tan. I mean, he almost looks like Doc Savage in this picture. Then if you go to the next image here, I'm starting to lay in the shadows in his pants. And when you're doing this, you try to get something down, and then you can hone in on the details. And so that I start playing the shadows into the pants and the shirt and the tank top. Okay, in this next picture, I put some hair on him, and as you can see, that sort of really changes his look a lot. And then I start working on our zombie girl's pants and shirt, tank top. I also added a purple tie, and I thought the idea was that, again, your eye would be going to the more saturated areas first, and then you can always back up on them, especially when you have them different layers. If we go to the next picture, I just started adding in more details on that, started adding in shadows in our zombie character, and then on the next picture you can see more detail in our background zombies. In this picture, there's a good bit of change with putting the hair on the zombies and start adding in cut and make it look like the zombie is starting to not to fall apart, but the zombies start looking more like zombies. Then I add in the sky, and I looked at a bunch of sky pictures and trying to figure out what kind of look I wanted for the sky, and I thought of it being more of a starting to go into the kind of golden sundown area. I didn't get too fussy with the clouds. The detailing on the clouds, I just put a cursory detail on it, and the nice thing with Art Rage is that you can lay some color down, and then you can use a blend tool to sort of swirl the clouds into a cloud-like shape, and then I just kind of blur the edges a little bit, and that's sort of my process for doing clouds. Now you can do different levels of it in terms of how you can work them pretty hard to make them nice and detailed. In case I just decided to put a layer in there to start to balance the picture a little bit. And then I also start adding additional grass. I put grass in there, but I wasn't real excited about the grass. There was a nice grass paint tool that I started using, and I put it on different layers to sort of think of it as in 3D. You have a background grass and you have a foreground grass, and I tried to vary the size and a little bit of the color so that you feel like there's a different depth to it. And then as you can see on this, the one thing I didn't draw very detailed was Merle Logan's right arm. Start blocking it in, and the next I start adding the metal details. And typically with metal, you can vary, given how hard the edges of your shine, how reflective it is. For example, on the base around his forearm, it's purposely not as the shine is not nearly as defined as it is on the knife and on his claws, because I wanted the metal to feel less shiny. I think in this picture I started the foreground zombie on the right. I added some clothes on him. He was a little bit of an afterthought when I initially put the picture together in terms of his clothes on that. So I just want to put something in there that was, like I said, dark, so your eyes sort of move past it and into the center of the picture. All right, and in the next picture I added some more details in the blood. I wanted the blood on the character to be kind of splattery. And as you can see, the claw arc, the blood is just kind of one thick line, and I didn't care for that, so I ended up changing that. All right, in this picture, I'm not happy with the background of the light. The light doesn't seem to fit sort of the lighting of the other characters. I initially thought I was going to backlight it and then have highlights, but I had done that in a couple other pictures, and I just didn't want to do it again. So I didn't. But the lighting of initially of the tower didn't really work, so I had to change it. And I also added a building because it felt like that area was pretty empty. So we needed to add a little something to sort of balance the right side of the picture. In this picture, I changed the shirt from red to green on the zombie getting sliced, and the reason is I didn't want it to be red blood with red shirt. I figured it would get lost. In this, I changed the lighting again. I'm starting to get happy with that. So in the next picture here, I've changed the arc of the blood on the claws to be more splatter looking. In this picture, I started adding detail in the tower. I put broken glass in the window, transparency of the glass, a little blue cast to it. And then I also add whites around it and add some lines to make it look like it was, made out of concrete, and feel pretty good about that. But the picture is still not quite where I want balance wise. So what I do is I add some smoke coming off the left hand side of the picture, and I feel like this sort of unifies the picture. On the top, the balance is really good. I think your eye is moving towards the center, or at least I feel happy with it. I also, at this point, I'm not happy with my foreground bushes. I have a nice little paintbrush for doing bushes, and so I add that, and then I think I'm just about done with it. And I also add a little smiley face for the tank top of our zombie girl. In this picture, I also add more detail in the zombie's cuts. Like, you can see a little bit of bone, you can see a little bit of muscle tissue in the cuts around the zombie. So I'm just adding little details here to be a little bit more interesting to look at with the additional detail. So I put my signature in there thinking I'm done. Of course, I look at it later and I decide I'm not quite happy with it. So I add a little bit more. And what I do is a concept called radiosity, where if you have a blue shirt on and you stand next to some person that has a yellow shirt on, light bounces off of your shirt and it sort of takes a little bit of blue off the one and puts a little bit on the yellow shirt, and vice versa. So you get a little bit of bounce of color. And so what I do in this situation is I add just a little bit of, like if you look at the green shirt, it has a little bit of yellow along the top where it's right next to the yellow pants, the tan pants. Then on the other side, there's a little bit of green blue from the reflection of the water. If you look underneath the zombie in the foreground on the left, you see just under his arm a little bit of blue, and under the chins maybe a little bit of blue. And then on our business zombie, just a little bit of blue in his yellow shirt. Just a little bit. Hard to say exactly what, obviously reflective materials is going to transmit a little bit more color. It's going to absorb more color, and the more diffuse, less shiny materials will be more muted in what it'll pick up. But still, just little hints of the color I think will add a little bit more to your picture. So I moved my signature. One of the last things I did was I moved the signature to the other side, and then on the final picture, I basically tweaked the back levels of the grass just a little bit, and maybe tweak a little levels here and there. And then I add a little title on the top left, and then the picture is basically done. Hopefully you've gleaned a little something out of this. Check out thursdayproductions.com or go to our Facebook site and check out some of the other stuff we're working on.